Welcome to Anecdotes for Success with Matt and Paul. Storytelling is an art form, emphasizing the value and learning that is created through personal experience. Our purpose is to share these stories and experiences with the listener. Everyone has a powerful testimony. Let's use them to level up to our best life with truth, meaning, trade-offs, and perspective.
Big shout out to Isaac Mather for the new podcast intro. You can check Isaac's music out on all socials or directly at isaacmathermusic.com. All right, episode 120. I know it was a surprise to you, Matt, until he was logging in, but we have our good friend Neil Folnsbee.
Yeah, good to see you, Neil. I saw your name pop up first, and I thought, all right, this is going to be good.
Yeah, it's been a while, but I'm so happy to have this opportunity to chat with you guys.
Absolutely.
We're glad you're on. And you know what's funny? We started this thing with phone calls, Matt and I, and then we started recording ourselves, and we feel like we've got it down a little better, gathering a following. We have some subscribers, some really cool things going on. We did a live episode. But when we have local famous people on like you, Neil, it's almost when we have the most views. Like we've had 2-star generals on, business people, authors, and fantastic. And we don't measure the analytics enough to know what's going on, but the conversations with the people we know the best seem to be the most authentic, if that makes sense. So no pressure is what I'm saying.
Oh man. Here.
Hey, Paul, I forgot to tell you, I was golfing yesterday, and two people that I ran into while we were golfing said that they listen regularly. So in reference some of our local guests, which is why I just triggered my memory there on that. But yeah, it's good stuff to what I mean, to run into people who say they're listening and getting something out of it. That was always the intent.
Well, I like that. And we haven't hired PR people. We've talked a lot about an intern. We could have another episode on that just for some of the social media stuff. But we're growing an authentic base. And yeah, it's not going as well. We don't know what good or bad is because we started with 0.
That's true.
So just the fact Neil listens once a month is probably good enough.
True.
Hey, enough about us, Neil. Tell everybody who you are, what you are. You can go back as far as you want. Hopefully not to like when you were 1. I don't know. But get telling your story, and then we'll jump in and pull more out and ask questions, and we'll have a good time.
All right. Sounds wonderful. So I am Neil Folnsbee. I live here in upstate New York, and I'm a high school teacher with the Horseheads District. And prior to this, I had a similar but also very different sort of occupation. And when you reached out to me, Paul, to ask if I would participate in this, and you said it's episode 120, my first thought was, holy cow, how are they already at 120? Because I know, we've talked, and I knew you guys had started this a couple of years back, and it was a little bud then, and now here it is, 120. But then I also got to thinking about the meaning, right, which is one of your pillars of 120, and I realized I don't know if it's ironic or if it's just a happy mistake, but 120 to me represents January 2020. Okay. And that's meaningful to me personally because that is when I officially made the first move that I needed to make for a career change. So it feels quite appropriate to be guest number 120 or on episode 120. So to me, every time January starts to roll around and loom ahead, I get to thinking, all right, what is the next year going to look like? What goals, opportunities might there be? What struggles might we face? And I know that some people do that, and that's when a lot of us set resolutions. And I guess I do that too. I put that pressure on myself in a way. But not only was it January of a new year, it was January 2020, which meant a new decade, right? So I'm thinking not only, okay, what's going to be coming up this year, but also what's going to be coming up this decade. And I don't know if it's like reaching a certain point in my life or a certain age that got me shifting that way, but it happened. And so January 2020 is when I made an official decision to change careers. 120, right? But it wasn't just a snap decision. It really goes back to 2016, a conversation that I had had with some former colleagues, and we were just kind of chatting. It was obviously very productive, a day for us. We kind of gathered, and one of my coworkers, I forget how it came up, but she asked, if you guys could do it all over again, if you could go back and rechart your path, what would you do instead? And people started talking about, oh, well, I think I would have gone to college for this, or I probably would have taken a year off, or I might not, we were all kind of talking about, now that we have some life experience, what we might do differently. And I found myself responding and saying, well, I think if I did it all again, I would do what I originally set out to do and become a teacher. And that night I was thinking about our conversation and what some of the others said. And I think it was meant to be a productive conversation, but that night I felt sort of, I don't know, unproductive because I thought, wait a minute, why are we saying things like, if I could go back and do it again? Like, why can't we just do it again now? And so that was when the seed was planted, I think, of, well, yeah, I guess I don't need to be doing what I'm doing right now forever. So we'll fast forward 2017. I met up with a friend who I don't get to see enough, but we see each other 2, 3 times a year. And we went out to eat 2017, and we were just talking, and he said, hey, how's work going? And I said something to the effect of, I think I'm ready for a change. And we talked a little bit about that, and he shared his perspective, and he too was ready for something different. And, that was that. The night ended, we went on. Now, interestingly, about a year later, we met up again and had those same kind of catch-up conversations. Hey, how are things going? And, of course, work came up, and he asked a similar question. And I said, well, I think I'm ready for a change. And he said, dude, you said that a year ago. And I was like, oh my goodness, you're right, I did. So he called me out, and I'm so happy that he did, because it helped me to realize, like, I've been saying that I'm ready for a change for a year now. And that sort of resonated with me, and it got me really thinking, okay, I can't just talk about it. Something's going to have to happen. Well, time went on, of course, and I didn't take immediate action on it. But then it was actually, working in my previous position in a capacity where I got to, spend time with you, Paul, and it was working with a student at BOCES, one of the New Visions students. Made a great connection, and that's always something I enjoy, making a connection with anybody, whether it's, a 16-year-old or a 60-year-old.
Right.
And I spoke with the student's mother. I happened to bump into her a couple of months after mentoring the student, and she just made a comment. I don't remember it word for word, but at this point it was about 2019. So suddenly, like years have gone by since I've already said I need to make a change. And she said, why aren't you a teacher? And I said, well, that was originally my plan. I was going to do that. She's like, but why aren't you? She's like, you have what it takes. And I don't know why, but it was, you know, people close to me had said, oh, you're good at this, and you do well at that. And in a way, we kind of almost come to expect those compliments from, our loved ones, and that's what we do for each other, right? We build each other up. But it was hearing it from this person who I really only had recently met, who had just a little glimpse of the way I interact with young people, and just the remark that she made about, I think this is your calling. And I was like, wow, if this new person to me can see something in me, maybe it's time for me to see that too. So it was, the belief from somebody else that really helped me to reinforce the concept that, like, okay, maybe I can do something different. Maybe I can be a teacher. Going back to that conversation in 2016, let's not go back. Let's look forward, and let's make a plan. So just a couple of months after receiving that comment from a student's parent, I made the decision to resign from my previous position. It was a comfortable position. It was something I had been doing for 11 years at that point. And, it wasn't a bad thing. It wasn't, it wasn't a disaster by any means, but it just didn't feel like it was what it should have been. And so it was January of 2020 that I decided to resign and call up some friends, ask for letters of recommendation, put an application in for graduate school. And the short version of it is, thankfully I was accepted into grad school. It was a wild ride. It was an 18-month program, which entailed full-time school. I did acquire a part-time job to make ends meet during that period of time. And of course, being a member of my family, I have a partner and I have a child, and so I wanted to be present for them. So it was a very tumultuous time of life for me, but ultimately we got through it. And I do say we got through it. It wasn't me alone. It wasn't, it was the support from family. It was, my supervisor at the time being understanding of the fact that I had night classes and had to be out of work at a certain time. It was all the people who helped me along the way, people like you, Paul, who wrote a letter of recommendation for me to, help me make it to that next benchmark of my goal. And that's really the medium, I guess I would say the short version, but it's the medium version of my story related to a career change.
This is right up our alley, and I know Matt's head's blowing up with some stuff right now. But from January 2020 till when you started at Horseheads High School, how much time went by before you actually were teaching?
It was, well, it was a year, actually, a year exactly. I wasn't necessarily set up to start teaching at Horseheads in January of 2021, but as a series of events transpired, there was suddenly a need for a long-term substitute teacher to fill in at the school. And so it was this thing where it was like, hey, we need you. It's go time. And what would I do? Say, no, well, I'm not quite ready yet. Give me a few months. Like it was like, all right, well, here we go.
Neil, it's a great story. I didn't know a lot of the nuance that I knew you'd changed careers and you were into teaching, but thanks for sharing that. It's fascinating. In fact, I wrote about 5 questions down while you're talking. I kept having to cross them out because you're answering them. So, but was your undergrad degree in what was it in?
So my undergraduate degree was actually in elementary education.
Okay.
So
So
initially I
what
set out.
happened? What happened from that to not starting to teach and going into the other career? What happened there?
That's a great question, Matt. It was the recession, really, 2008. Um,
Ah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. At the time that I finished college, it was the end of 2008. Yeah, December of 2008. And as we all know, the economy was not quite what we would like it to be. And at the time, teaching positions were being cut, all kinds of different things were shifting, and it just really it was a matter of bad timing. And it was then that I thought, well, let me see if I could find something maybe adjacent
Mm-hmm.
to teaching, to to maybe helping people in some different capacity. And maybe it's temporary, I don't know, but I've got to figure something out because, I've graduated college and I'm supposed to be an adult suddenly, um, which I'm still working on, by the way. But
Join the crowd.
Don't stop. Don't
yeah,
stop being you. Amen.
Neil,
so
so do you think and what are you teaching now?
I teach high school English and I also teach a high school elective, Intro to Psychology.
Interesting. Do you think you're a better teacher because of this past experience? A less effective teacher? I mean, what do you think that, those 11 years out in the I'll call this the regular workforce, what kind of impact does that what kind of impact has that had on you as a teacher?
It ultimately it helped to shape who I am today. And to answer your question head on, Matt, it helped me to be a more effective teacher. Just having this life experience and being able to do things like build relationships with people, and even for me to understand and learn what things like professionalism are.
Mm,
I honestly think if I had gotten directly out of college and went right into teaching, I don't think I would have I would have made it work. We all do these things, right? We're humans, we're resilient. But I think that it all happened for a reason. And even though it took me, as I shared earlier, 4, 5 years to actually put a change in motion, I think it all just things just sort of lined up in the way that they did for it to work the way it did.
um, Paul, did you? I thought you put your hand up like you're going to ask a question. You
No,
know me.
I
I
I
I
started
won't
when I was
stop
20.
unless you make me.
No, I started when I was 25, so I had 3 years of wandering or in the real world or whatever. I can't imagine 11 years, but you nailed it. The building relationships, even the little things like I go coach and I'm home at 5:30 and I've taught and coached and home, and a lot of people with 9 to 5 jobs and 2 hours off a year, they're burnt out and they haven't seen any sunshine in the day. And, it, there's perspective in so many ways, from how you deal with kids, how you deal with colleagues, how you appreciate what you're doing, the opportunities, the change. So that's why I was like, oh yeah, I wasn't like
Yeah,
wagging my
that's
finger
that's what I
like
thought.
Matumbo
Yeah,
at him.
yeah.
But
Hey,
sorry, I
Neil.
didn't mean that.
No. I didn't want you to forget because I saw you do that with your hand. I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
he's
yeah.
got something there. Neil, one of the things probably most fascinating from what I've heard from you so far is you you took you took action. There's so many people who I spoke to some classes today, and I talked about taking action all day long. I talked about, the difference between those who do and don't, and your decision making, and basically, as I said, that every kid, they heard it repeatedly. You are the decisions you make. Your life will be the decisions you make. I don't care where you come from. Those things are factors. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to say they're not, but at the end of the day, you gotta make your own decisions and go with them. You were in a position in your life, you were 11 years in. I know the company you're with. You could have worked another, what, I don't know, 15, 20 years, whatever. I'm sure it could have had a very comfortable life. You use the word comfortable, and I noted that because that's sometimes a killer. In fact, for most people, it is a killer. It interferes with their ability, or their, not their ability, their decision to choose the thing they find meaning and purpose in. You overcame all that in order to go and do something that I assume pays less to start. Had to go work for, you had to go back to school for 18 months. You've got a family that you're committed to, as you should be, and you've got all these things going on, and you still chose to take this action. That's different, Neil. That's not what most people would do. Most people would just hunker down and go, well, I'll see you in 19 years of my 30-year retirement, and then I'll start finding something I like to do, or some meaning in it, or whatever. I don't want to disrupt this, this life I've been building. What on earth made you pull the trigger on that decision? Because I love it. I absolutely love it, if you can't tell.
Right, right. And thank you for sharing the enthusiasm, Matt. It just, I love the energy. Um, I think, I'm thinking now of a couple of different things. One was having a conversation with a previous colleague, and you're right, Matt. I did previously make more than I do now, and certainly I could have, remained there another 15 years, 20 maybe, and potentially retirement and all of that. It was talking with a coworker who was maybe, I might say, disgruntled, maybe a little dissatisfied with their position at that time. And this is someone who had already been there for, I think, I want to say 16 or 17 years. And it was hearing that person say, as we were opening up to each other and saying, hey, do you think this is it? Is this the rest of life for you? Is this what we're doing? Is this our purpose? And it was that coworker saying, well, I've got 16, 17 years in. I really only have 13 left. So I'm going to stick it out. And on one hand, I understand 13 is less than 17, right? You've done 17 years, 13 is going to be relatively easy, you would hope. But at the same time, I was thinking, that's 13 years. 13 years of life. And as we all know, 13 years, so much can happen in that time span. So there was that. And then also, I think, we talk about that word comfortable, right? What feels comfortable and what we can get by with. But I also realized that I was beginning to use the term comfortable interchangeably. This is what English teachers do.
I wasn't helping you with that. So.
Me neither. I was stuck, Neil.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Interchangeably with complacency.
Yes, yes. I think that's how. Yes, in this circumstance, I think that's so common. Not to interrupt, Neil, but I got a passion for this topic. And anyway, continue. But yes, that's what I hear from so many.
Right, and that was really the point there. Is I realized that yes, I was comfortable, but I was also just sort of doing what I had to do, going with the day to day, and I had grown complacent. It was
Mm.
this is it, and not a whole lot happens that throws me way off course or anything, and it's all good, right?
Yeah.
But then I realized deep down that as far as we know, we have one life to live, and we've got to make the best of what we've got right here and right now. And it was just kind of that mindset shift that helped me to understand that, okay, I'm just growing comfortable slash complacent, and that's not it. This is not the end of the line for me. There's more out there. I don't know at the time I didn't know exactly what it was, but it's something. We've got to make some kind of change.
Neil, you explained it best with the colleague that was 16, 17 years in and had 13 years to go. The problem is we become institutionalized and we start treating our life almost like it's a prison term.
Yeah.
I use the analogy a lot. We build this invisible fence around our lives. So we're this dog that thinks we have all this freedom, but we never break through to actually see just what can be done. And you're talking a decade plus for that individual. And if you're lucky, you have 7 decades, 8, 9, we don't know, some less. So you're basically 3, 4 years into your freedom since you left your institutionalized sentence. How do you feel? Like, what's your process every day? Do you think about it a lot?
Well, I do think about it often. And in one of the classes I teach, in the very beginning of the semester, we do a pretty simple writing exercise in which students are tasked with writing about their proudest accomplishment. And when I teach, I always like to provide any sort of personal or real world example that I can. And so I provide an example of my proudest accomplishment. And I usually give a couple, different scales, different, meanings too. And I realized that I'm proud to share this particular, accomplishment that we've been talking about, in which I reached a certain point, and as an adult decided to go back to college, and despite having a family and needing to pay bills and all of the important you know needs in life. It's something that I'm so proud of, and it was a very difficult time for me to do that, as I shared earlier. Just I was spread very thin. I was sick a couple of different times, and I think that's because of stress. I think my immune system was probably compromised, and so it was possibly the longest 18 years of my life, or excuse me, 18 months of my life. See, I don't know, maybe that was
It
Freudian of
felt
some
like
sort, right?
exactly. But because of all those things, because of making taking the initiative to make the change, but then also sustaining through that 18-month period, I'm so proud that I did it, and I love what I'm doing now. And yeah, often, people ask, well, how's teaching going? Do you like it? Or how are you? And not every day is perfect. We all understand that, I think. But yeah, it was the right thing to do, and I'm very happy I did it.
I mean, we talk about it all the time because Matt, you had your moment where you broke away. I had my moment. There's no like people my age a lot are talking about retirement or doing nothing. And I like being around people like you guys and our podcast guests because I'm thinking about what my next stages of growth or success or what I want to try to accomplish. And I feel like once you make that sacrifice like you did, you're not done. I mean, I'm not saying you're going to stop teaching, but you're gonna take that freedom and do things that your past self will keep in the future. Your past self will you'll be proud, you'll be thankful for your past self, I should say, that you kept doing those things.
Right. Yeah.
Neil, question for you. You mentioned your partner and you have, I think you said one child.
Correct.
And I don't know how old that child was when this decision was made, but how did that go? I mean, I can only imagine, I can only imagine that, hey, I think we need to have a talk. Way to hear my great idea about what was that like?
You're exactly right. So I pitched this whole shebang to my wife, and um, she will admit to this day that her response, both inward and outward, was, "You're crazy." And it was because of that whole comfortability. You
Yeah.
know, we had our income. We, at the time, to answer that one of the questions you had there, Matt, at the time, my son was 2, so very young, and of course, well, I from what I hear at all ages, they require some level of attention, but at that age particularly, there was a lot there, and I had to communicate this vision, this goal, this dream with her before I did with anyone else, because I knew that if it was going to happen, we were going to need to have a solid foundation and compatibility and communication, and in a sense, I would need her blessing
Mm.
to be able to move to the next step, because if it just wasn't feasible with all of our other commitments and engagements and such, then it wouldn't have happened.
Was there a lot of convincing, or was it she just knows she's going to support you in this because it's what you want?
I think it was the latter. I think it was, her knowing me well enough to not pitch an idea without having thought about it myself for a long period of time. She knows I'm an overthinker, sometimes to a fault. And yeah, it was, and I had, of course, I think I'm like you guys in a sense where I have these ideas and they're there and you're like so excited about it and you want to make it happen. And maybe you take down some notes, like I did tonight for our conversation. But um, it was, I guess, showing that this isn't just something I dreamt of last night and woke up, thought, hey, let's try this thing. So I'm lucky that she was mostly receptive to the idea.
Yeah, I got to give her a tremendous amount of credit. I can't imagine the things that would have been going through her mind, any, spouse's mind in a moment like that, the circumstances you were in, and to have the belief in you and your and the belief in you and the love for you and her together to want to pursue something that mattered that much is really special. It's really a special thing.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's tremendous. That's tremendous.
Now, Neil, I know what an asset you are to the school district. So let me guess your daily schedule. You get there 5 minutes before the kids come, and then you leave for lunch, and you give them some worksheets, and then you leave at the end of the day. Is that how it goes?
Yep, right as soon as that bell rings at the end of the day, I'm gone. Not
What
fun. Not
yeah,
fun.
what things have you become involved in? Because I know it's not just about teaching, it's really, you value the relationships you're building. The teaching is almost just the platform to do that, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And honestly, that's something that I learned from other people, people like you, Paul. I'm not, trying to whatever. Just being totally honest and transparent,
I'm gonna
seeing,
get that. I'm gonna get that clip set up soon. So
right, right. Are you gonna have that accidentally repeat over and over again?
yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Starting a TikTok page. All right, go ahead.
Um, So yeah, no, really, you're exactly right. The relationships are a priority for me. And I think a lot of teachers these days recognize that in order to reach a destination with any number of learners, you've got to have a relationship first that, if you don't, it's just going to fall through or implode. So yeah, it's really taking the time to get to know other people. And it's funny, I realized that, earlier I even shared with you guys examples of these conversations I would have with coworkers back then. I don't really have conversations anymore with adults, um, except for this
Yeah,
one.
no, I was gonna say tonight's no exception, but
Yeah.
I know that went right over my head. What a
yeah.
great opportunity, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of the conversations that I have and the relationships that I'm building and maintaining are with younger people. And so that's become a priority to me. And it's something that it's a craft, that I'm trying to hone and to
Mm,
get better with, getting to know, what motivates other people, what interests other people, what clicks or connects and appeals to them. And yeah, it's spending that time while the students are there, getting to know them. And then I don't leave as soon as that last bell rings. It's really, that's when I start doing the actual teacher, planning, printing, curriculum, preparation type stuff, because I'm too busy during the day with the students and, those face-to-face interactions. And that's, to me, just priority. So, we talked earlier about how had those 11 years in a previous career shifted or shaped me to who I am today. One thing I realize is it's easy for me to just be plugging away after the last bell rings and to look up at the clock and see that it's 5:15. And I'm like, oh, and I think, it was being in the professional and the business world that really conditioned me to
mhm.
to being able to work an 8-hour day without flinching, without thinking twice.
That transitions pretty well for one of the questions I had. So if I do some math, I assume that when you got into the teaching world, you were what, 33, 34 years old, somewhere in that neighborhood. What was that like coming? I would imagine most new teachers are in their early 20s, and what was that situation like coming in where is there a hazing process in the team? Well, what was that like?
It was it was noticeable. I think, to me personally, looking around and a good example of it, when people start in a new school district and they have an orientation, everybody gathers. It's, in my school district, it's a 2 to 3 day thing. And as, I got to the orientation and looked around, I was like, am I am I old or am I young? Like, who am I here? I was sort of questioning my identity. Um, and honestly, there was, because this orientation included a number of different roles and positions, there was a range of different, people in different ages. But I did realize that, based on either the appearance or some of the subjects and topics that people were talking about, I did realize, like, okay, so I'm not 23. And I have a little bit of different perspective on things. And yeah, so I think I noticed it more than anyone, but I wouldn't say that anyone treated me differently because of it, which
Got it.
was nice.
Yeah.
No one looked at me twice and was like, wait, how old is that guy? Right. But maybe they did. Maybe I was looking the other way. I don't know.
That's funny.
So back real quick, a quick story about the relationships. We're interviewing for students for next year. And there's several that have, you've written recommendations for, and we always value your word. You know, it's like the Bible to us. But one of the questions we ask the students are, who do you most admire and why? And I don't have enough fingers on my hands for the ones that say Mr. Folnsbee. And I get a smile every time, because I'm like, oh, all three of us, we love Neil. And the kids are like, how do they know that guy? You know. But a couple of them today were saying they ate lunch with you.
Oh yeah. Yep. So yeah, to your point, the question you had asked earlier, we do have a period. We teachers have a period for which we have our lunch break. We might run errands, or sit in our room alone quietly and eat, or maybe we go home and let our animals go to the bathroom, or whatever it
Right.
is.
A
But
lot of valid reasons, especially when you have families and stuff.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. And every situation's different, and I respect that. But I choose to stay in school and open my door to students to come in and eat, whether it's because they feel comfortable in that space, or because maybe they just want to be there and we can have some of these random conversations. One of the benefits of it is, we were talking earlier about building relationships, getting to know students, is I get to have these candid conversations with them where it's not necessarily tied to a subject or a topic that we're learning about in school. It's when I get to learn more about the individuals, or maybe I even get to learn like what the new slang terms are, so that I can stay hip and whatnot. Hip isn't really a good word anymore, so
We were just talking about it before you came on, because I thought tomorrow was Wednesday, even though it was acting like today's Wednesday, right? And I'm like, where are you? Look, anyways, we were talking about the same thing, some things I had with students in the past, and the real trust and relationships are built during the activity periods and the lunch periods and the clubs and the sports, and it's so much fun, isn't it? So I give you a lot of credit for being that hip teacher at lunch.
thank you.
I gotta assume, Neil, in a situation like that, you know, I can never remember this study. I've been trying to manifest it for speaking of hip words. I feel like that's one that's out there, although that's probably old now too. There was a study, and I've referenced it a couple times, but I keep forgetting what it was. But it doesn't matter, because the point at the end of the day was still the same. Trust is built, relationships are built, and Paul and I, we talk relationships all the time. You talk them clearly all the time. They're so important. They're vital. At the end of the day, what it comes down to, though, is authenticity, and that's what this study came out with. Is basically, if you're going to build these relationships, if you're going to connect, like, you're not going to fake it. It's just not going to long term. I mean, you might be able to fake it for a little while, right? And there are people who can do that, but long term, these things are built on authenticity. And my impression is that is probably why these students who gravitate towards you, or Paul was referencing the students who put in their papers, you know, mention you as being a favorite teacher and commenting and those kinds of things. So if we'll presume that you're authentic, right? I think that's a safe presumption. Where does it come from? And is that a confidence in your abilities? Is it a confidence in who you are as a person? It's hard to be authentic a lot of times, right? We want people to like us. We want people to see us in a certain way, and that can make us unauthentic. And where does that come from? Because I think it's pretty clear that's the kind of person you are, and it is probably, according to this study, it was the most powerful thing, which someday I'll figure out what that study was. But have you always been this type? Did the teaching bring something that out of you? What is that?
That's a great question. I would say that it is the real me. I'd like to think too that I'm being authentic, and that's part of why things work well, because I don't treat students like any lesser of a human just because they're half my age or less than half my age at this point. Um, but
It gets worse, Neil. It gets worse. Trust me.
um, so just being genuine. Hey, you're a person. I'm a person. We have feelings. We're all human. But I do think it's also a confidence that I've built over the years. And it didn't always come quickly or naturally. I was born with a skin condition that affects my hair, my skin, my nails. And because of that, I've always looked differently to people. And with that, confidence wasn't always a quick and easy thing for me.
Mhm.
And
Of course.
I understand we all have our own differences. We're all unique in our own ways. But having that sort of was something that I would say probably in my teenage years became a focus for me. And of course, teenage years are ever popular for figuring out identity and who you're supposed to be and what you're supposed to do. And part of, finding identity is understanding authenticity, just like you were saying. And who are you meant to be? Versus who are you trying to be, or who do you want to be like? It's not that, it's just being yourself, right? And so I think over time, beginning in my teenage years and then just even to today, being comfortable in my skin and recognizing that, this is who I am. And I may look different than other people, but again, we all have feelings. And what matters most, I think, in a lot of situations is that we care for each other, take care of our own, and we're all we've got. So we ought to help one another out as long as we can. And I think students recognize that that's what I'm doing. I'm just there to help. Like that's my goal. I really hope that I can achieve that goal, whether it's with one student or eight or eventually, 800 like Paul, or more. I don't know at this point, but, and you as well, Matt, you just mentioned that you were speaking with students today. That's just what I want to do. And I feel that as long as I let people see who I am, see that I'm comfortable with who I am, let them know what my intentions are. I'm here to help. Then I don't think we can go wrong.
Well said.
Yeah, that's very well said. I want to ask you a question in closing. What advice would you give to people that have for the last year or two been saying I'm ready for a change?
I would say don't settle. I know that might have been used before in other capacities, but I think that that's when things get dangerous, when we just again grow complacent, settling, and hey, this is all right. But instead, look at, okay, what's next? Where am I going? What's the next big thing? I mean, even though I now am a teacher and I'm very proud of that, I'm not looking at this like, all right, job's done. Let's ride the wave for however long I need to ride it until I am told that I can retire. But it's keep looking
Mm.
forward, and what's next for you. So even though I'm where I want to be, I'm still constantly thinking about like what can I do next? What's the big thing? And it wasn't until today that I realized the next big thing for me was being a guest on Anecdotes for Success.
Why are we shouldn't be laughing. You're right. That is a good goal.
Right. And so that would be the advice, when I think people we just kind of tend to get comfortable and maybe even a little stuck. And it is what you make it. Just Matt, you mentioned earlier, you've had these other conversations and seems to be a theme or a trend where, people just kind of, yep, I'm doing this. Here it is. But
Neil, within the first 2 minutes of you speaking, the first thing I wrote on top of my paper, I since crossed it out, was "Don't settle." So for you to bring that up, I just of course had to chuckle because I think that it was clear to me, to whoever's listening, just to ourselves, it's such an important message, is that this idea of complacency and just, well, I guess I'll just keep riding this wave, as you put it, or whatever, and I'll just settle for it. It's one of the it makes me sad when I talk to people, which I do, many adults who find themselves in that position, and they don't take the action you took, and they just settle for they have their reasons, and things are complicated, as we all know. But I'm so glad that that's one of the messages that you can deliver to young people or anybody. It's very important. So I fantastic. I love it.
and I'll, if you don't mind, Matt, I'll add one more.
Please.
Hearing you sort of summarize that back made me think too that you're never too old to initiate a change. And I think that was one of the big things for me too. So in addition to don't settle, recognize that just because you've been with an employer or in a position for X number of years, or just because you've reached a certain age in life, doesn't mean that it's too late or it's over.
I love it. You're right. You're absolutely right, because that's the trap for so many people. It's like they don't want to settle. They want pursue of something of more meaning and purpose, but I'm too old. I'm too far down the path. And there's a roadblock for so many people, right? So I'm glad you mentioned that. I think that's very valuable. I'm glad you brought that up.
Neil, I lied. That wasn't the last question. So we always talk about happiness is in the journey and the pursuit. It's not a destination. When you look back at the sacrifices you had to make to become a teacher, it gives you a lot of satisfaction, right? And when you look back, there was probably a little bit of happiness in the journey along with the stress. And I think over time you'll feed off that. And we've talked about it in the past, Matt. It becomes addictive almost. What's the next pursuit? We're not talking about not being present and enjoying every day and being grateful, but there's nothing wrong with having another pursuit on your own terms. I think you'll do that.
Right.
Hey, this was fantastic. Will you come on again in the future?
I would love to. Yeah.
I'm not going to ask you what numbers of importance. I'm just going to pick an episode and you're going to tie it into the number, right? The universal speak.
Right. That's right. It will all work out as it should.
That's pretty cool though. Neil, I miss working with you in the past, but we've worked in better ways since. So I'm super excited for what you've accomplished and what you will accomplish. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you guys. And thank you for this opportunity. It's great to catch up with both of you.
Absolutely. Talk soon.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.